Hey, loves, it's Dr. Simone Ellis with Beyond the Chair podcast. And I know, especially in my profession, burnout is a real thing. And did you know that there are people out here that can help you overcome it? I'm excited today because we're going to be interviewing none other than the Kylie Ota, who is the specialist in overcoming burnout. And I can't wait to get into her story. So, Kylie, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about burnout because I know it affects so many people. And when I got my diagnosis, I had no idea that that's what it was.
Wow, I can't wait to get into like talking about how like the understanding, even how you got to that. But before we actually do that, let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself. So tell me about your background and how you actually got into studying the burnout journey.
Yeah, so I was a victim of burnout first. And when I went through my healing journey with my naturopath, I realized that I could also help others recover from burnout. So I went to the Health Coach Institute, got certified, and they had a special program for adrenal burnout and how to help people heal from that. And because I have a project management background, I was able to use the stuff that I learned in corporate to
Yeah.
help with all the different aspects of entrepreneurship, not just like everything that we have health-wise going on when it comes to burnout, but also processes and systems and how to really alleviate a lot of the stress with tech, with, systems, SOPs, things of that nature, because there's a lot of things that I saw entrepreneurs doing manually in their business when there was probably an app or some kind of tech, that could help with scheduling or, the mundane things that we have to do every day. And so I combined those two skills to kind of do what I'm doing today. So, yeah.
I love that. So talk to me a little bit about how did you know that you were experiencing burnout? And I've never even heard of adrenal burnout before preparing for this interview. So talk to us a little bit about that. Because for people who may not know that they're even experiencing burnout, what does that look like? So first, how did you know that you were going through burnout? What was the journey like? What was happening in your life at that time?
Yeah. Um, so in the moment, what I recently got married at the time when I got diagnosed. So we had been together for like 2 years. And I was falling asleep all the time. And I was a shift worker. I worked in oil and gas for 19 years. So being a shift worker, I was like, well, I'm used to this hashtag team no
Right,
sleep.
right. You're just like, I'm grinding. And this is what grinding looks like.
Right. But every time I would sit in a chair, it'd be like I fall asleep. And my
Mm.
husband was like, why are you so tired all the time? I said, I'm a shift worker. And he's like, well, I I worked in shift work too. He worked for the airlines for 17 years. So he
Okay.
knows shift work. It's like, I don't have those symptoms that you have. And so for 3 months, he kept bugging me to go to the doctor, go get checked. I'm like, blah, right? I'm too busy. I'm
Yeah, were
too
you
busy
are
to
you
go to the
falling asleep like
doctor.
every time you're sitting down in a chair, like you're literally just passing out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So
Like
you
we
didn't
go
think
to
it was
dinner
like and just
and
pass out?
movies. And before the credits are even done, I'm like, taking a snooze. He's like, you're wasting my money. Like
Right.
I bought this
Like
ticket,
why are we having these days if you can't stay up and awake for them, right?
right? And his love language is quality time. So it really did bother
Oh,
him
yeah.
that I wasn't there, active and present with him. And he's like, you're giving everything to everybody else. And when you come home to spend time with me, you're knocked out. So it was
Wow.
affecting our relationship as well. So I said, fine, I'll go get checked. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm good. Like that's where I was. But when I went to get checked, the doctor took a whole, like 7 vacutainers full of blood. They checked everything under the sun. What came out was I actually had Epstein-Barr, which is mono,
Mhm.
and that was affecting what was happening in my body, the adrenals, because I was in chronic inflammation and, like a chronic illness status, my body was keep trying to fight the infection and whatever was happening in my body. So that's where the adrenals were overworked and led to a cortisol drop off. So my
Wow.
cortisol numbers were near zero, was zero point 0.8. When he read the blood test back to me, he said, I've never seen anyone with these numbers that wasn't bedridden.
Wow.
He's like, I don't even know how you walked into the office today. I said, well, by the grace of God. But
Yeah.
that's
So, and sometimes we just operate in chronic stress, right? Sometimes we just operate in chronic trauma. Like we just don't even know that these are the things going on and we're still moving and shaking just like that, right?
right. Yeah. And um it so it became this journey that I was on. And he's like, okay, so to heal yourself, you need to get like 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night so that your adrenals can heal and reset. I looked at him and said, I work a 12-hour day.
Mm.
Like that was what we were scheduled. We were scheduled for a 12-hour shift. And he said, oh, well, that's not going to work. It's like, well, I'm going to have 10 hours of sleep and then 2 hours to do everything
Yeah, you're
else,
like, I can be
right?
a human for 2 hours and everything else will be work and play. And did you notice that, or did he feel like, and sometimes I think when I travel, like, and I go see the Western world and the Eastern world, I'm like, we, we overwork so hard. And I think a lot of people experience that shift work, like working really long hours and then coming home and crashing.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. So my doctor was trained in Western medicine, but he shifted his practice to be more Eastern based. And so he started doing supplements and those different kind of protocols. So I know that if I had gone to a Western medicine doctor, they probably wouldn't have caught it.
mm,
Or I wouldn't have gone through the protocol that he had taken me through with the supplements and the rest and whatever. They probably would have just gave me some kind of pill, some kind of other thing to help me just to get by and not actually heal the root cause. So I'm so
right.
thankful that I found him in the time that I did and I was seeing him. And he's a person that I tested with, and he read the numbers the way that he did and got me on a protocol that actually healed my adrenals because I know a lot of people that have gone through burnout and I don't um yeah, some of the things that they've told me when they finally come to work with me, it's like, oh, they were just kind of masking the symptoms,
So
not
for
actually healing the root cause.
so for someone who is trying to figure out what burnout is, or like what is the
Yeah.
definition of burnout?
So the medical definition of burnout is when your hormone levels are really low. So your adrenal glands are not producing the chemical cortisol that it's supposed to produce. Cortisol is your fight or flight chemical. And in this day and age, when we are under chronic stress, our our cortisol is always pumping, right? It's always pumping. And so there's actually 4 stages of burnout. So when I got diagnosed, I was in stage 4. I learned all of this like after the fact, but I was in stage 4 because my cortisol levels were really low. My adrenal glands were shot. But before I got into stage 4, like looking back at my health history, I realized that, like I said, in stage 3, what happens is for females, like your sexual chemicals will start deteriorating. So I
Hmm.
was on replacement therapy at age 32. Right now, I'm 44. So I was on HRT at age 32 because I was having all of
Wow.
these symptoms going on in my body. So it's like technically I was in stage 3 back at that time. I got
Wow.
diagnosed when I was around like 37. So looking back, I was like, oh, okay. Like I could have saw the signs, but I didn't know. I didn't
Right.
know.
So how did you figure out, like, you were at work, your doctor is telling you, "Hey, I need to take off, you know, he wants you to get rest," and you're like, "I can't get rest." What were you able to do?
Yeah, so he ended up writing me a doctor's note. I got off of work for like 3 months, and luckily I had the medical leave to be able to do that and afford to do that. I know some people don't have that. And while I was resting, I wasn't actually resting. I
Mm.
replaced my at work to-do list with my at home to-do list. And when I went back a month later for my monthly checkup, he said, your numbers really haven't changed with everything that you're supposed to be doing with this protocol that I gave you. Things should have shifted by now. And that's when we realized I had replaced that busy work I was doing at work into busy work I was doing at home. So what ended up happening, he said, well, don't you aren't your kids older? So my kids were like in their teens at the time. Like your kids are not young. You don't have to take care of them.
Mm.
And he's like, you have a husband. I had been a single mom for like 10 years before we got married. So, he's like, you have a husband now,
It was
right? I'm
harder for
like,
you to
yes.
delegate.
Yeah, because I was such a control freak.
Yeah.
Like, my husband will attest to it. He's like, he kind of stopped helping me around the house because I would go back and like refold the towels or reload the dishwasher. Because I'm like, you could fit more dishes in here. Let me
Wow.
just rearrange it. Such a control freak. So part of my healing journey really was to release control, release, like learn how to delegate, not just at work. Because I feel like at work, it's kind of easier to delegate because we all have roles, right?
Right.
I'm the manager, you are my direct report. So of course, like this is a natural relationship, but in the home, I feel like it's different, especially with, cultural and societies. Like, okay, women do this type of work in the home, men do this type of work in the home. And I had to stop, like, I feel like I lost my identity for a little while because I had built
Mm.
my identity on mothering, on being a good wife, doing all of those, societal norm
Yeah.
type of things.
Yeah,
And
women
I
a
was like,
lot of times
oh,
have to fall into these roles that sometimes they're overwhelming at some point. You know,
yes.
they're just like these titles and these roles that you're like, is that who I am, or is that who that role is asking me to be? And how do I show up? How am I showing up and presented in this role? So I'm excited to kind of walk this conversation down a little bit more to find out, pertaining to this. We want to talk about, the entrepreneur roller ship and the roller coaster. And when you're on this journey, especially as healthcare providers who may not have that opportunity or time to take off that extent, what are some of what is an entrepreneur roller coaster? Because for me, as I listen to this, I'm like, I wonder what stage of burnout was I in any year this year or this year? Because
Yeah.
when you are a business owner, a lot of times so many things fall on you, and you feel like,
Yes.
especially in our culture, I got to get it done. And what I also notice as being a woman and feeling like I got to get it done is that there's roles that end up happening that you are supposed to do when you go home.
Yes.
And I remember telling I can't remember who I was having this conversation, but I remember this conversation very specifically saying women are asked to code shift from the commute from work to home, literally turning from this like entrepreneurial boss like mentality of trying to get things done to then all of a sudden having to shift into a personality that is conducive for the home, where men a lot of times don't have to do that. And
Mhm.
so I am excited to hear your conversation about what is the entrepreneurial roller coaster, and how does it impact entrepreneurs during, when they're launching a business.
Yeah, so the thing with what you're saying about the women have roles and the men kind of don't have to shift in and out. Oil and gas is a predominantly male
Yes.
environment.
Uh-huh. So is
And so,
dentistry, right?
yeah,
Dentistry.
right. Yeah. And so some of the challenges that I had to deal with, like they didn't have to deal with. And it, I used to say, oh, I wish I had a wife.
Yeah.
I want to get me a wife
Right, because
when I was
the
single.
wifes is popping right now. They're making sure things
Right.
are good at home, right?
Right. Right. Anyway, yeah, so the entrepreneur roller coaster, especially with launching a business, there are so many things that are related. Like there's the physical aspects of what happens when when you're experiencing burnout. But out of all of the different energy types, I talk about like the PEMS energies, which is just an acronym for physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. By the time it hits you physically, you've already depleted your stores on the emotional, the mental, right? A lot of it starts with the mental stress. And then how does that affect us, right? We have these thoughts. Thoughts lead to actions. And so, right, what are we thinking about ourselves, especially when we're talking about like, oh, I have to because this is the role that I play. So those were the thoughts that were plaguing me when I was supposed to be resting. I'm like, no, but I have to, the dishes are done. And I felt so lazy. You know,
Mm.
it was the hardest thing to be lazy, quote, lazy. As I had never been lazy in my whole life. I've been called lazy, and that kind of drove me to be the workforce that I was. Because anytime I was sitting around when I was a kid, my mom was like, "Oh, you got time to sit down? Oh, why don't you pick up a broom? Why don't you like there's stuff you can do around the house instead of sitting around and being lazy." So
Mm.
that was like ingrained in me. And so the hardest thing for me to do was sit on the couch and do nothing. I don't
Mm.
know if any of the people in the audience feel this way.
I completely remember the moment that I decided to go to the movie theaters by myself because I was so used to being busy and being active. And I was like, I'm gonna just go to the movies because I want to. And I remember looking around the theater like, one, am I supposed to be here? Like, is this okay? Right. And
Yes.
the second thing I was like, is this what people call relaxing? Oh my God. What does this feel like? You almost feel like, I don't know if the right word is, I felt bad in some aspects of actually taking the time to just sit there and say, I'm going to, by the time that movie ended, I said, if this is what relaxing is called, I need more of this because I couldn't believe I gave myself permission. I think that that's the hard part. It's hard to give yourself permission
That's
sometimes
it.
to relax, even though your
Yeah.
body is telling you that. And I know for entrepreneurs, especially like myself included, my mom used to always say, if you don't sit down, God will sit you down, meaning that like your body is
Mm,
going to shut down and therefore it's forcing you to sit down. And we, like you, were having these forced sit downs, right?
yes.
Um, so I'm curious to know like what are some of the typical triggers that entrepreneurs may face during the early stages of their business because I
Yeah.
would hate for anybody to get to that burnout level because once you're burnt out, it's kind of hard to pick it back up.
Yeah, it's a real hard journey. It's similar to like when you're working out at the gym and like you injure yourself. There's a lot more recovery that has to happen because you overdid it. So now you have to baby. Well, I'm pointing to my elbow because I did it to myself, but right now I have to baby my elbow every time I go to the gym because I went too hard. I feel like that's a really good analogy for people who may not understand the burnout. Because here's the thing, when I was on medical leave for burnout from work, there was also another guy that was on medical leave for pancreatic cancer at the same time.
Mm.
And it was kind of weird how people were treating his cancer because cancer is technically a real disease. At the time that I was diagnosed in like 2017, burnout wasn't really popular or even a thing. The endocrine system is kind of hidden, right? And people didn't really understand a lot about hormones and how all of that worked. So like he was like, okay, people understood cancer, but people didn't understand adrenal burnout. They didn't
Mm.
understand like cortisol and how all of that works and the endocrine system and how we need the endocrine system to really get us through the day. Like the chemicals that kind of like squirt out here and there, like they're the ones that are regulating your sugar. They're the ones that are regulating all the different activities that happen in your body. So once that whole endocrine system has a shutdown, it's like you're not making the things that you need to make.
So you feel like
It,
it
you
was
know, like,
because of the gravity of the situation of cancer, which we all know. Like, yeah, I could see how that could be hard for people to understand. And also, too, cancer has a much dire diagnosis
right.
than burnout, right? So
Yeah.
we are taught to just kind of push through those things. As I
Yeah.
listen to you discuss it, I'm like, there's so many times where it's like, just push through, and for especially symptoms that are not always, I guess, physically present, right? When somebody
Yeah.
has pancreatic cancer, you can start to see the deterioration on the body from whether it's jaundice in the eyes or things like that. But what you were experiencing was chronic fatigue, and
Yeah.
people probably just felt like you were just always tired. Um,
Yeah.
I've experienced diagnoses that have been like I have stage 4 endometriosis, and I remember taking like Vicodin every hour on the hour, and no one could see the hell that was going on in the inside. So you almost feel
Yeah.
like, am I tripping? It's probably like women having hot flashes. Like they're having their own personal summer going on here, and no one else can, no one else knows about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it It was a lot of the journey that I was on, healing the burnout. Yes, the supplements helped. Yes, all of that, like helping my physical body was key, but it was all up here. It was the mindset shift that I had to have about rest, about relaxation, about taking me time. Like I had been a single mother for 10 years up to this point before we got married, and we'd been together for 2 years and I got the diagnosis. So I was giving everything to my job, was giving everything to my kids and to church and to all these different things that I was serving on. When it came time to give back to me, it felt so foreign.
Mm.
And I feel like when you're starting up a business, when you're launching, like, your business is your baby, as they say sometimes, and you feel like you have to keep giving everything to this thing. And it kind of sucks the life out of you at sometimes because you're not only are you pouring like money in there, you're pouring your time, your energy, like everything to get this thing going. And like with that, all of that momentum that's going, like you feel like if when we talk about those spinning plates that everybody has going on, right? It's like if I stop, then these plates are going to fall and come crashing down. And everything that I've worked towards, like some of us have quit really good corporate jobs to start a business. Like if I stop spinning all these plates, then everything's going to come crashing down. And all the time, money, and energy that I've already put in is just going to go to waste. And so the first one is imposter syndrome, self-doubt and criticism. Like, what did I do? Like, did I leave my job for this? Like,
Mm.
all the thoughts come in. I left security behind. I left like really good money behind. And I also had like my parents coming at me like, oh, like, why are you leaving a six-figure position to go do your own thing? Like, it's not guaranteed. Like, my parents are boomers, so they grew up in the that culture where
That hustle culture. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Absolutely.
and you go to that one job until you retire,
Yeah.
get your pension, and you're good. Like, my dad could not understand, like, why are you leaving this really good job that it's so hard to get into and you're just leaving it? And like, well, when I said it was a health issue, they kind of could understand it, but also I have been getting God nudges along the way that this was like m making gasoline for a living was not my calling, and I needed to really pursue what God had for me to do on the earth. And it just took leaving that security. Sometimes God calls us out of what's secure so that we can trust him and move forward and do those things. And it's really scary sometimes. So, like the self-doubt and the criticism, like comparing myself to other entrepreneurs, because, right, I went through the Health Coach Institute. So we all graduated at the same time. And then you're looking at other people like, oh, well, how come her business is taking off? And she's got more clients than me. Like we all went to the same school, we all graduated at the same time. Why am I doing something wrong? And so there's a lot of self-doubt and self-criticism when it comes to that. And there's the fear of judgment. So my fear of judgment came from like some peers, but a lot of it came from my coworkers or ex-coworkers and like, are you crazy? Like
Mm-hmm.
you must have flipped your lid. And like not having that money too was also a fear. It's like, ooh, we went from a two-income household to a one-income household. And it was like really a walk of faith and like just trusting God that this was the right decision. And so some of the ways to counteract that first trigger of the self-doubt and the criticism is to just acknowledge and validate your feelings. Because when we're talking about burnout, we're talking about adrenals and cortisol, right? Cortisol is your fight or flight chemical. The more stress that you put on yourself, the worse the burnout is going to get because your cortisol is going to be all over the place. And once we acknowledge and validate our feelings and that the ups and downs of entrepreneurship are normal,
Mm.
right? It's normal to have all your time, money, and energy to be put into this thing and it not really produce. Like when you're planting a garden, you put a seed in the ground, it's not going to give you fruit, for like a couple, depending on your what fruit you're planting, but it may not yield for a couple of years, and you're still putting in all the sweat equity,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and for me, right, it was taking every thought captive, right? Challenging all of these negative thoughts. And like, okay, yes, I get this. Like, this is what it looks like, but by faith, like I'm just standing in this belief that this is the direction I am going in. And like, I believe so much in my work and this business that, sometimes that belief is what carries us through, even
Hmm.
in like chronic illnesses. Like right now, my best friend she's has a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. And, it's that thoughts and beliefs that kind of just pull you through because, you know, we never know what's going to happen, especially when it comes to cancer. But, the thoughts and beliefs that we have about certain things is really what gets us through. So just the shifting my thoughts and like turning them around
Yeah.
was what I relied on. And that's what I also help my clients do as well. Like we go through a lot of mindset work in my program because it really is like how we were before, like whether they're workaholics. In my program, I call them the powerhouses. I have a quiz that is based on these 4 basic personality types, and those are the powerhouses that they work and work and work and work. Like they're so used to working, it's like, okay, take it down a notch. And then I have the what I call the popular archetypes. She's kind of like the social butterfly where she gets a lot of ideas and generates a lot of ideas, but she doesn't she maybe has like slight ADHD, very just up here, like kind of in head in the clouds, a lot of idea driven thought, you know, like very creative entrepreneur, and but not a lot of energy to execute because she doesn't she's not as grounded. So there's just different ways that we can help people overcome burnout based on their personality type. So personality type in my program like is really huge because
Hmm.
if I told a powerhouse person to sit down, chillax, they'll be like that would be really hard for them and we'd have to do some mindset work on that. But that's the main thing that they need to do. Like for powerhouses, I don't have to tell them to set boundaries. They're pretty good at setting boundaries, right? They know what they want, they go after it. But there's the other side where there's people pleasers who like that's their protocol. It's like, okay, well, you need to really start setting boundaries because all of your time and energy is being spent on what I call OPP, other people's problems. And, you know, they don't have the time and the energy to have that rest time so that they can reset. Because so it's just a kind of different protocols for different types of personalities. And that's what I realized when I'm working with these different entrepreneurs we all have a different bent. We're all born differently. We all have what's driving us, what's the driver behind why we're working so hard or why we're not resting. And so psychologically, there's a little different approach for the 4 different personality types. But yeah, that's the first one is just the self-doubt and the criticism that we sometimes put on ourselves as entrepreneurs and the imposter syndrome that we have to deal with because now we're going from something we're really good at, we're making really good money at, and then we're going into something that's totally new.
Yeah.
We have no skill set. Like we're learning on the job, but we're not getting paid to learn on the job
Hmm.
because we're the ones that are generating our own income at the time. So, yeah.
So for me, when I was like going through entrepreneurial journey, as my listeners know, I've been open for about 14 years. You don't really know what you're going through as far as triggers, and your body experiencing burnout for me was actually giving, like you said, physical manifestations, which probably was happening internally also too. I just didn't know. I would break out into hives because I was so overstressed. The new cool thing that's going on to my body when I get stressed out is my eye jumps. So this eye over here just starts just having its own like field day back and forth. And as you can imagine, trying to practice dentistry with an eye that is just jumping back and forth because it's so stressed out is wild. And so
Yeah.
what I didn't know, because I come from a a blue collar work family. I come from a very hardworking baby boomer
Yeah.
era as well. I'm
Yeah.
taught to be like a grinder. Like I'm taught to
Yeah.
just continue to go. And
Yeah.
it's so funny that even though I was doing all those things, my mother and my father could kind of see like, okay, maybe she's taking this too far. And I think that
Yeah.
with dentists, especially with business owners, some of the concerns that we have is, you don't know really how much is too much. And you really don't
Yeah.
even know. Like when I listened to your conversation, the first thing that popped into my mind is that, well, as an entrepreneur, like, yes, you have all these discs going, but how do you know which one to let like kind of go down a little bit and let this one continue to go?
Yeah.
That was what I struggled with a lot, was really kind of figuring out or striking the balance. So what's your
Yeah.
advice for that? Because I think that when you want to build a business, especially at the beginning, you know it's going to take a lot of hard work. You're excited about the hard work, but it also can be detrimental to the overall success.
Yeah. So using the spinning plates analogy, what was told to me was some plates are made out of glass and some plates are made out of rubber. They bounce
Mm,
back.
I love
So
that. I love
the
that.
glass plates for me were family. Like, if you, and this is personal, I've experienced this because I was working so hard, I lost connection with my kids and they thought that I had placed more value in my work than into them.
Mm.
And so, right, I had let that plate drop and that glass plate had shattered. And in Japanese culture, there's this thing called kintsugi
I love
where,
kintsugi where you put the glass back together, the plates back together. Yep.
yeah. So I feel like in this new era of my life, I'm doing a lot of kintsugi
Mm.
with my children. And I mean, my husband was there at the beginning of this burnout journey, and I made a lot of shifts since then. But like with my own parents, like I've had resentment against them. There's a lot of forgiveness that had to go on. So like there's a lot of kintsugi going on in my own life.
Mm.
And so that was what was explained to me. It was some are glass, some are rubber. Like the rubber ones that bounce back is your job. I mean, for entrepreneurs, right, our work is our baby, but really, like, if you lost your practice today, y- you could build it back up. But there's other things that are not fixable without a lot of work. So,
Yeah, I agree with that. And sometimes we learn that way too late. You know, I experienced where the plates were dropping. I was married before. I saw that plate shattering and it wasn't able to be put back. I was wanting to have a family, but because I was so stressed out, I was physically putting my body in a way that really wasn't conducive to any type of like life there. I mean,
yeah,
it's so funny. I think about I was dying inside and literally creating an environment where nothing else could thrive. And
yeah,
so you learn sometimes the hard way that, as you like you said, that these plates break. But one of the cool things about Kintsugi is that when you put the plates back together, you guys use gold and the silvers, and it becomes even a prettier plate. And I look back now on
yes,
my life of the burnout that I experienced, and then putting the puzzles back together.
yeah,
One, I know I needed to transform. Unfortunately for a lot of us, it ends up happening in a very catastrophic way. But when you do get the opportunity to put it back together, and I hope anybody listening to that can resonate with that, when you could put it back together, it doesn't mean that it's going to go back the same way, but it
yeah,
can go back into a beautiful way.
yeah.
So, what are some of the common signs and symptoms that, when people are launching these businesses amongst trauma that they're going to probably experience, so people can recognize, like, okay, this is something that's probably going to happen, and what's some solutions that they can put in play to make sure that they counterbalance that?
Yeah, yeah. I know we already talked about like the self-doubt and the criticism and how we talk to ourselves. Another one to look out for is perfectionism.
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And so there's like two sides to that coin. There is, I'm going to use fight or flight as the example here because there's two different personality types. There's the powerhouse, that's the pusher, right? And then there is the So that would be a fight personality, right? She will just push and push and like push this boulder up the hill. Like whatever energy, time, energy, and money she can muster, she will push that thing, right? But pushing in the form of, when you're looking at it from a perfectionistic standpoint, is make sure there are no mistakes. Make sure, you know, that everything's perfect before we go live. Make sure, like everything's set. And that adds additional stress, which causes the cortisol to go out of whack. And so the pushing energy, we know, right? And these usually are the adrenal junkies. And when I say adrenal junkies, we live off of the adrenaline rush. Like without it, we don't know what to do with ourselves. We don't know how to relax. And it's kind of how we get our self-worth and our value from pushing so hard, especially because everyone around us is like, oh, you're a superwoman. I don't know how you're doing all of that, but like, go you. And we kind of live off of that. We feed off of that energy from other people. And we feel like if we stop pushing, we're going to let everybody down, you know? And on the other side of that, there's the flight, which would be procrastination. And I call it procrastinating because there's a lot of times where we're like, oh, I need to get everything right before I start moving. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the opposite energy, but it's the flight side of the cortisol. It's okay, I'm gonna run away because I'm scared. I'm too scared to press go. I'm going to just sit on this thing and think about it and plan everything and, make sure I got everything right. They both want everything right, but the other one, the flight mechanism that operates is, I'm not going to do anything permanent. I'm not going to press go until it is perfect. And right in life, nothing is perfect. So for those people, I tell them, okay, 80-20 rule, 80-20 rule. Like just get it to 80%. 80% is still a B,
Yeah.
right? It's still a
You're
B.
still you're
B is
still you're
good.
still winning at life right now.
You're still
You're not
winning,
failing, right?
but you're not going to get into that, you're not going to dip into that 20% where, you have nothing left. If you go
Yeah.
all the way to 100%, it's like pedal to the metal, right? You're going to grind your gears, like using cars as an example, right? You're going to grind your gears. Like if you went 100 miles an hour driving LA to Vegas, you never stop for gas, you never check the radiator, you never check the oil, and you just keep, like, what's going to happen to your car? Your car is going to break down. You have to stop. You have to rest. Like in life, in the earth, like that's just the way that it goes. There is work time, there is rest time, and we need to kind of honor those cycles when we keep going and going and going and we push. Yeah, but to speak what you said about, building a family, right? My current marriage is my third. There's a whole story behind that, but this one is my third marriage, and I was still in the childbearing years. I was like in my later 30s, but
Hmm.
still childbearing. But because I was having these symptoms or my hormones were not operating correctly, I know that's why my husband and I weren't able to conceive
Mm.
in this
Yeah.
third marriage. I'm like, well, I have one child from each of my first two marriages. I'm like, well, I want a baby with you because I finally found someone that I really good for me,
Yeah.
and I really love you, and like this is gonna be like my forever man.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But
I
no, I
def
couldn't conceive.
Yeah, I think that we don't realize how much stress and the cortisol levels impact us. And like, again, like it's too late. And one of the things that I wanted to piggyback on what you were saying also as well is when you do understand that now, I plan now I plan backwards. I plan my
Yeah,
vacation time first and then my life second. And
yeah,
why I do that is because I know that if I don't write it down, if I don't block off the time, it won't happen.
it won't happen.
And I started
Yeah,
noticing my flow as a dentist, like, okay, by month 2, I had been in there. I was working 6 days a week when I first opened. I was exhausted. So I knew I kind of needed a break after the 2-month mark because the
yeah,
amount of hours were like wearing me down. The other thing that I
yeah,
think that people don't think about is physical exhaustion is one thing, but mental exhaustion is another. So I couldn't figure out like we are labor intensive, right? So I was like, okay, I'm having issues with my neck and my back, but I was always mentally tired too. And
Yes.
so you just start as doctors, I want you guys to start thinking about planning your schedule with yourself first, which means that taking the time off to block off the time to say, okay, I kind of see that by the time I get to the second month mark, I'm a little exhausted. I'm a little tired. So I need to go
Yes.
ahead and like make sure I put that proper time in. The other
Right.
thing that are non-negotiables for me now is I have to at least go to counseling twice a month, at least. And the reason why I do that is because it's a standing Tuesday appointment for me. And I make it consistent with my schedule so I don't have to mentally use any other time to think about it.
Exactly.
If you
Yes.
ask me on Tuesday what I'm doing, if usually I'm like, oh, I either have counseling and then I have time afterwards. So it's like a standing day. I don't think about it. But I never thought about like sometimes there's fires coming at you that you of course don't know, and you
Yeah.
need an outlet outside of your family and your friends that you need to discuss that with.
Yeah.
And by doing that and putting the vacation and the counseling, and I threw one more thing in there, I was physically breaking my body down. I was physically burning
Mm.
out my body as well. And so
Yeah.
with our profession, hearing is off because you're hearing these drills all day, right? So I can like,
Yeah.
right? Your neck is consistently a problem because you're bending down all the time. So I have all
Yeah.
this tension, right? And then most
Yeah.
people hold stress in these areas
Yes.
as well. So it was just like I felt like I would be carrying boulders around on my shoulders. And so I started making weekly I don't even call them massage therapy appointments. I call it's like a physical therapy because it helps to
Yeah.
regenerate myself and to get myself through those weeks. So for people who
Yeah.
are trying to pace themselves in a career, because that's really what I think the take home is, right? We got to pace
Yes.
ourselves mentally. I love what you said is the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Physically, I make sure I'm taking care of myself with the massage, or
Yeah.
mentally, I'm making sure I take care of myself with going to counseling, and that takes care of my mental and my emotional. And then
Yeah.
spiritually, depending upon what you believe in, like church is a place, a safe haven, or meditation is a safe haven.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I did, but I learned those things way too late. So I really want to know also,
Yeah.
what do you learn from those failures when people have already gotten to burnout? How do they build themselves back up? Because as someone who has experienced burnout, I'll be honest, it's been hard to try to get myself back. It was hard for me to try to get myself back to the Simone I remember.
Yeah, there for me, same. It was a complete identity shift because I had identified myself by my work. That's where I got my value and my worth was how good of a mother I was, how, good of a wife I was, how good I was at work. Like, was I producing,
Mm,
And when I was asked to put down the producing hat and put on the resting hat and the recovery hat, such a mindset shift. And a lot of it was an ego trip too, because I'm like, well, I'm the one that can do it, right? And so a lot of it, like I had to tell my ego to sit down. Like, okay, I get it. You are really good at what you do. Because I mean, my whole life I've been the smart one. You, so a lot of my life I've been really good at a lot of different things. And so to put down my ego and say, okay, Kylie, this is not your time to shine. Like you have to find your identity and your worth in something other than your work
yeah.
and what you're doing, right? Like
And that's
someone says
tough.
we're human beings, not human doings. I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
And that's tough because I think that unfortunately we're not really asked to define ourselves outside of roles. Right, right. Like we're not asked to define ourselves outside of roles. It's like, well, what do you do? And when people ask you who you are, you
like,
automatically start off with,
I'm a
"I'm a
dentist.
dentist. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. No, no. who are you? And that exploration, that question stuns a lot of us. I remember one of my friends was like, "What do you do for fun?" And I was like, "I mean, I read entrepreneur books. Is that fun?" And they were like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Well," and then I started thinking about things because I was doing things, but I couldn't even think of how I was relaxing. I'll
Right.
be glad to say that I feel like I've definitely figured out, again, the hard way, but how to
Yeah.
put those things back in place. So, as an expert, can you give us advice on, what you offer to entrepreneurs to navigate this emotional roller coaster? I know you talked about this quiz, but what are some other things that you offer to your clients that may be experiencing that burnout that they really, really need help in?
Yeah. And so in a nutshell, I would say like the number one thing is for entrepreneurs is learning how to delegate, learning how to release. And I know like as a dentist, right? You have to do your dentist roles, but what I say to my clients, because I have some clients who are practitioners, some clients who do other things. But what I do with them is like, okay, anything that needs your face, in your case, hands or whatever, like anything that needs your face is yours. Anything that doesn't need your face, like sending out an email, posting things on social media, creating social media content, like you film it and hand it off to somebody else to create into a reel. Like, and just like you, right? You have a podcast producer. So anything that you do that doesn't require your face needs to be outsourced as soon as possible. And I get it, cash flow is an issue
Right.
sometimes, but and so sometimes I say you may not need to hire a person, right? Because that's a person you have to pay, but maybe there's an app that can do that for you. You pay $20 a month and have something like sends out notifications automatically. If people want to, book a schedule, like book a dentist appointment, could you have a virtual calendar that people could automatically book themselves so you don't have to have a receptionist?
Right.
That's taken. I mean, yes, you need some hands-on, but maybe the receptionist can just do follow-ups but the people can book on their own. And there's a lot of we're transitioning these days into a more online type of, people are more comfortable doing those things these days as well. So, some of the people that I've helped that have like older older styles of doing work that they like the high touch, sometimes it's hard to transition them into becoming a more digital agency or whatever. Once I show them the benefits of outsourcing things to technology, then they see it. Oh, because right, if they do have an assistant that's doing the work, I find that usually the assistants are more tech savvy than, the practitioner. So they'll be happy to stop doing the mundane, like
Yeah.
like if they got the people to book their own, they're like, okay, cool. And then all they have to do is manage the back end. That's less time, money, and energy on their plate. So actually, you're getting less billable hours from your staff as well when you outsource to a technology.
Yeah.
And then you can train the staff to manage the technology and not have to manage all the things.
So, since you've had an opportunity to now go through your burnout and come out of it and using different tools and tips to kind of get yourself back, talk to me a little bit about your success story. Now, how do you feel as an entrepreneur that has gotten their life back, has overcome burnout?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so funny. Like there are times when, I do burn the midnight oil and I don't sleep enough, especially now with, things in my personal life where I'm not getting a whole lot of sleep. And I think back to when I am driving kind of like under the weather, like driving tired. Like, I can't believe I used to drive like this all the time. Like
Mm.
how unsafe is this? Like that's the one thing that I remember is like, oh, this is what I used to be like all the time, half baked. And they say like driving tired is the same or worse than driving drunk or under the influence. It's
Oh,
it's kind
wow.
of the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could imagine. One of my worst accidents was me falling asleep at the wheel.
Wow.
because I was so tired. And now I'm just like, I'm a terrible driver just in general. Like, I'm one of these people that like, a Tesla would probably be a great idea for me because I suck at driving. And then having that
My husband would
experience.
probably agree with you for me, but
Look, I remember seeing, I was on Instagram, and there was this gift or this meme that was going around where the man was like, my wife over here thinks she's a passenger princess, but really I'm just trying to save both of our lives. And I'm like, I am her. I am her. Like, please drive for me. I don't even want to touch a car because I'm just not, it's not my jam. It's not my jam. I will figure out everything else to do but drive the car. But I completely agree with you. So I am so thankful for having the opportunity to get a chance to talk about burnout and even just shedding light on we hear this word burnout, but really what it is, learning the stages about them, the physical manifestations of them, and how to circumvent them. So, for people who are interested in kind of finding out more about you and your services and things that you offer, where can they find you?
yeah. I'm mostly active on Instagram. I'm at Kylie.ota on Instagram. I check my DMs regularly, so yeah. But you can also go to my website, kylieota.com, and I talked about this personality quiz that I have on there, and it's called the Burnout Archetype Quiz. And you can take that and find out your personality type. And when you take the quiz, you'll get some tips on how to really run your business according to your personality type. Because, right, it's different strokes for different folks. And when I was helping clients, I had, I'm very structured. I love SOPs. So I'm like, oh, this is how you help someone with burnout. Then I realized because they were coming in with different personality type, different work styles, different values. I was like, oh, okay, what worked for this person may not work for that person because they struggle a lot more with boundaries or they struggle a lot more with rest and relaxation. So we do cover everything inside of my program, but um, once we understand your personality type, it's like there's four. So it's like you're taking 75% off the plate and we focus on that 25% that's really personalized to you and how you work. And I find that the clients are way more receptive to like, okay, oh, I am this type of way. Yes, I get it. You get me. You're not giving me just this cookie cutter thing. Like you get me, you get my value system, you get all of that. So working in that one quadrant for each client really helps to get them results faster.
I love that. I love that. Well, Kylie, thank you so much for your time, energy, and effort. Guys, this is Beyond the Chair. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone, especially if you know that they're going through burnout, because as dentists, we're a community, and it's important that we continue to share this information to others. Kylie, again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's so fun.
Thank you, guys. Be sure to turn into next week. Like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.